there comes a moment in every life when you stand at the edge of what feels familiar and stare into what feels uncertain. Your heart begins to race, your thoughts become louder, and fear tries to convince you that staying where you are is safer than stepping into what God has prepared for you. But deep within, there is a quiet voice reminding you that you were never created to live bound by fear. You were created to walk by faith, even when the path ahead is unclear. Fear has a way of magnifying the unknown. It paints pictures of failure, loss, and disappointment. It tells you that you are not ready, not capable, not strong enough. But fear does not speak truth, it speaks limitation. And if you listen to it long enough, it will keep you standing still when God is calling you to move forward. The greatest tragedy is not failure. It is allowing fear to keep you from discovering what God has already set in motion for your life. You must understand that fear and faith cannot lead you at the same time. One will always silence the other. When you choose to hold on to fear, you are essentially saying that your circumstances are greater than God's power. But when you choose to trust, even with trembling hands and an uncertain heart, you are declaring that God is greater than anything standing before you. That is where transformation begins, not when everything makes sense, but when you decide to trust anyway. Letting go of fear is not about pretending it does not exist. It is about refusing to let it control your decisions. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the decision to move forward despite it. Every step you take in faith weakens the grip of fear over your life. Every moment you choose to trust God instead of your doubts, you grow stronger spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. Sometimes God will lead you into situations where you do not have all the answers, not to confuse you, but to teach you dependence. Because as long as you believe you can control everything, you will struggle to fully trust Him. But when you reach a place where you realize that your strength is not enough, your wisdom is limited, and your plans are uncertain, you begin to lean on Him in a deeper way. And that is exactly where He wants you, not self-reliant, but God-dependent. There will be times when the path ahead seems completely dark. You will not see the outcome, and you may not even understand the direction. But faith does not require full visibility, it requires obedience. God does not ask you to see the entire journey, He asks you to take the next step. And when you take that step, He will provide the light for the next one. This is how trust is built, step by step, moment by moment. You may be holding on to something right now out of fear of loss, fear of change, fear of the unknown. But what if the very thing you are holding on to is the thing preventing you from stepping into something greater? Sometimes God asks you to release what feels comfortable so He can lead you into what is purposeful. And while it may feel difficult in the moment, what He has prepared for you is always better than what you are afraid to leave behind. Trusting God also means accepting that His timing is different from yours. Fear often grows in waiting seasons because you begin to question whether anything is happening at all. But just because you cannot see progress does not mean God is not working. There are things being arranged, doors being prepared, and paths being cleared that you cannot yet see. Your responsibility is not to figure it all out, it is to remain faithful in the waiting. When you let go of fear, you begin to experience a kind of peace that does not depend on circumstances. It is a peace that remains even when things are uncertain. A confidence that does not come from knowing what will happen, but from knowing who is in control. And when you truly believe that God is guiding your steps, you stop living in constant worry about the future. The truth is, where God is taking you will require a version of you that is stronger, braver, and more trusting than you have ever been before. That is why you are being stretched. That is why you are being challenged, not to break you, but to prepare you. Fear will try to convince you that you are being led into something too difficult, but faith will remind you that you are being prepared for something meaningful. You cannot step into your purpose while clinging to fear. You cannot embrace your calling while doubting the one who called you. At some point, you must make a decision to either remain where you are, controlled by fear, or to step forward, guided by faith. And that decision will shape the direction of your life. Every great step of faith begins with a moment of surrender. A moment where you say, God, I don't understand everything, but I trust you. That kind of surrender does not make life easier, but it makes it meaningful. Because you are no longer trying to navigate life on your own, you are walking with the one who sees the end from the beginning. Fear will always try to speak louder, but you must choose which voice you will follow. The voice of fear leads to hesitation, doubt, and missed opportunities. The voice of God leads to growth, purpose, and fulfillment. And while the journey may not always be easy, it will always be worth it. So let go of the fear that has been holding you back. Release the doubts that have been clouding your vision. Stop waiting for everything to make sense before you move forward. Trust that where God is leading you is not by accident. Trust that even in uncertainty there is divine direction. And trust that every step you take in faith is leading you exactly where you are meant to be. Fear has a subtle but powerful way of shaping the direction of a person's life. It rarely appears as something obvious or dramatic. Instead, it whispers quiet doubts into your mind, making you question your abilities, your timing, and even your worth. It convinces you to stay where things feel safe and predictable, even when deep inside you know you are meant for more. The danger of fear is not just that it makes you uncomfortable, it is that it keeps you from stepping into the very purpose God has prepared for you. It builds invisible walls around your potential and then convinces you those walls are there to protect you, when in reality, they are keeping you confined. When you allow fear to take control, you begin to live a life based on what if. What if I fail? What if things don't work out? What if I'm not good enough? These questions create hesitation, and hesitation leads to missed opportunities. Over time, you may find yourself stuck in the same place, not because God hasn't opened doors, but because fear has kept you from walking through them. It's important to recognize that fear will never point you toward growth. It will always guide you toward comfort, and comfort is often the very place where progress stops. Faith, on the other hand, calls you to move even when you don't have all the answers. It asks you to trust not in what you can see, but in what God has promised. This is not easy because it requires you to release control. Human nature wants certainty. It wants guarantees. But God often works in ways that require you to step forward without knowing exactly how everything will unfold. This is where the true battle between fear and faith takes place, not in your circumstances, but in your mind and heart. You cannot walk in fear and expect to fully experience God's purpose for your life. The two are in constant opposition. Fear tells you to hold back, faith tells you to step forward. Fear magnifies the risks, faith magnifies God's power. Fear focuses on your limitations, faith reminds you of God's strength working through you. The direction you choose to follow will determine the life you live. If you continue to listen to fear, you will always find a reason not to move. But if you choose faith, you will always find a reason to trust God, even when it doesn't make sense. There are moments when God will place something on your heart, a calling, a dream, a direction, and immediately fear will rise up to challenge it. It will tell you that you're not ready, that you don't have enough resources, or that the timing is wrong. But what you must understand is that God does not call you based on your current qualifications. He calls you based on His purpose. If you wait until you feel fully prepared, you may never take the first step. Faith requires action before full confidence. It requires obedience before understanding. The process of choosing faith over fear is not a one-time decision. It is something you must practice daily. Every day, you are faced with choices, small and large, that either move you closer to your purpose or keep you stuck in fear. It might be speaking up when you feel hesitant, stepping into a new opportunity, or letting go of something that no longer aligns with where God is taking you. Each time you choose faith, you weaken the influence of fear over your life. Each step forward becomes a declaration that you trust God more than your doubts. It is also important to understand that fear often disguises itself as logic. It presents arguments that seem reasonable and practical. It tells you that you are being careful, that you are avoiding risk, that you are thinking things through. But there is a difference between wisdom and fear. Wisdom seeks guidance and moves forward with trust, while fear uses caution as an excuse to remain inactive. You must learn to discern the difference, because not every reasonable thought is aligned with faith. When you begin to walk by faith, you will notice a shift within yourself. The same situations that once intimidated you will no longer have the same power. The same uncertainties that once caused anxiety will begin to feel like opportunities for growth. This doesn't mean fear disappears completely, but it no longer controls your decisions. Instead of asking, "What if I fail?" you begin to ask, "What if this is exactly where God wants me to be?" That shift in perspective changes everything. God's purpose for your life is always greater than your fears, but it requires your participation. He will not force you to step forward, you must choose it. And that choice often comes in moments where fear feels strongest. Those are the moments that matter most, because they determine whether you remain where you are or move into what God has prepared. You don't need perfect confidence to take that step. You only need enough faith to trust that God will meet you there. Every step of faith builds momentum. What once felt impossible begins to feel achievable. What once seemed overwhelming begins to feel manageable. And over time, you begin to see how God was guiding you all along. Doors open that you never could have opened on your own. Strength grows in areas where you once felt weak, and purpose becomes clearer with each step you take. The life you are meant to live is not found in the safety of fear, but in the courage of faith. It is not found in holding back, but in stepping forward. And while fear will always try to convince you to stay where you are, faith will always remind you that there is more ahead, waiting for you to trust God enough to move toward it. There are seasons in life when clarity seems out of reach, when the direction ahead feels uncertain, and the answers you are looking for simply do not come. In those moments, it is easy to feel unsettled, even discouraged, because you want assurance before you take a step. You want to know how things will turn out, how challenges will be handled, and whether the path you are considering will lead to success or disappointment. But the truth is, God often works most powerfully in seasons where you do not have all the answers, because it is in that uncertainty that your trust in Him begins to grow deeper and stronger. If everything in your life were fully explained and clearly mapped out, there would be no need for trust. You would simply follow a predictable plan based on your own understanding. But God's ways are not designed to keep you comfortable. They are designed to transform you. And transformation rarely happens in certainty. It happens in the unknown. It happens when you are stretched beyond your own reasoning and invited to rely on something greater than yourself. Uncertainty has a way of exposing what you truly depend on. When things are clear and predictable, it is easy to say you trust God. But when you are faced with decisions that do not come with guarantees, you must be prepared to face the uncertainty. When you are asked to move without knowing exactly where it will lead, your response reveals the depth of your faith. Do you step forward in obedience, or do you hold back until everything makes sense? That moment of decision is where your relationship with God is strengthened or stagnated. God does not withhold answers to frustrate you. He allows uncertainty to develop your dependence on Him. Because as long as you believe you can figure everything out on your own, you will continue to rely on your own strength. But when you come to the end of your own understanding, when you realize that your plans are limited and your perspective is incomplete, you begin to lean on Him in a way that is deeper and more genuine. That is where trust begins to take root, not in knowing everything, but in surrendering your need to know. There is a process that unfolds when you walk through uncertainty with faith. At first, it feels uncomfortable. You may question whether you are making the right decisions, whether you are hearing correctly, or whether you are capable of handling what lies ahead. But as you continue to take steps forward, even small ones, you begin to notice something changing within you. You become less dependent on outcomes and more focused on obedience. You stop trying to control every detail and start trusting that God is guiding your path, even when you cannot see it clearly. Each step of obedience builds confidence not in yourself, but in God's faithfulness. You begin to look back and realize that He has been guiding you all along. Situations that once seemed confusing start to make sense in hindsight. Doors that opened at the right time, protection you didn't even recognize in the moment, and opportunities that aligned perfectly begin to reveal a pattern of divine guidance. This reflection strengthens your trust, making it easier to move forward the next time uncertainty arises. One of the greatest challenges in uncertain seasons is patience. You want things to happen quickly. You want clarity now, not later. But God's timing is not rushed, and it is not random. Every delay, every pause, and every waiting period serves a purpose. Sometimes the delay is not about the situation, it is about you. It is about preparing your heart, refining your character, and strengthening your faith, so that when the opportunity comes, you are ready to step into it with confidence. It is also important to understand that uncertainty does not mean absence of direction. God may not reveal the entire path, but He always provides enough guidance for the next step. The challenge is to trust that small direction. It may not feel significant, and it may not answer all your questions, but it is enough to move you forward. And as you take that step, more clarity begins to unfold. Not all at once, but gradually in a way that keeps you connected to Him. Fear often tries to take advantage of uncertainty by filling the gaps with negative assumptions. It tells you that if you cannot see the outcome, it must be bad. It convinces you that the unknown is something to avoid. But faith shifts your perspective. Instead of fearing the unknown, you begin to see it as a space where God is working behind the scenes. A place where possibilities exist beyond your imagination. A place where growth happens, not just externally, but internally. As your trust deepens, you begin to experience a different kind of peace. Not a peace that comes from having all the answers, but a peace that comes from knowing that God is in control. This peace allows you to move forward without constant anxiety. It allows you to face challenges without being overwhelmed. It anchors you in the understanding that even if things do not go as you expected, they are still unfolding according to a greater plan. The journey through uncertainty is not meant to weaken you, it is meant to strengthen you. It is shaping you into someone who does not rely solely on circumstances but on faith, someone who does not require constant reassurance but walks confidently in trust. And while the process may not always be comfortable, it is always purposeful. Every step of obedience, every moment of patience, and every act of trust is building something within you that will prepare you for what lies ahead. Letting go is one of the most difficult things a person can be asked to do, especially when what you are holding on to feels familiar, comfortable, or even necessary. There is a natural resistance within the human heart that clings to what it knows, even if it is no longer aligned with where God is leading. You may sense that something new is ahead, something greater, something more purposeful. Yet at the same time feel the weight of releasing what has become part of your identity or security. This internal tension is not accidental, it is part of the process of growth. Because you cannot fully step into what God has prepared while holding tightly to what He is asking you to release. Often, what you are holding on to is not inherently bad. It may be a habit, a relationship, a mindset, or even a season that once served a purpose in your life. But just because something was right for a season does not mean it is meant to stay forever. God works in seasons, and each season carries its own assignments, lessons, and directions. When a season ends, holding on to it can prevent you from entering the next one. The challenge is recognizing when it is time to let go and trusting that what lies ahead is worth the release. Fear plays a significant role in making letting go feel impossible. It whispers that if you release what you have, you may end up with nothing. It convinces you that the unknown is too risky and that staying where you are is the safer choice. But what fear fails to tell you is that holding on out of fear often keeps you stuck in a place that limits your growth. What feels like security can actually become a barrier, and the longer you stay in that place, the harder it becomes to move forward. Letting go requires trust at a level that goes beyond logic. It means believing that God sees what you cannot see and knows what you do not know. It means accepting that His plan is not based on your comfort, but on your purpose. When God asks you to release something, it is never to leave you empty-handed. It is to make room for something better, something more aligned with who you are becoming. But you must be willing to open your hands. You cannot receive what is ahead if your grip is still tight on what is behind. Control is another barrier that makes letting go difficult. There is a desire to manage outcomes, to predict results, and to ensure that everything works out in a certain way. But control is an illusion when it comes to God's plan. The more you try to control every detail, the more frustrated you become when things do not go as expected. Letting go of control does not mean giving up responsibility. It means trusting God with what is beyond your control. It means doing your part while allowing Him to do what only He can do. There is also a deeper level of surrender that involves releasing your own expectations. Sometimes you have a vision of how things should unfold, a timeline you believe is right, or an outcome you have convinced yourself is best. But God's plans often look different from your expectations. And if you hold too tightly to your own vision, you may miss what He is actually doing. Letting go in this sense means being open to His direction, even when it does not match your original plans. The process of letting go is not always immediate. It can happen gradually, in layers, as you begin to understand and accept what God is asking of you. There may be moments of hesitation, moments where you question whether you are making the right choice. But each time you choose to release a little more, you create space for something new to enter your life. And over time, what once felt difficult begins to feel freeing. As you let go, you may begin to notice a shift in your perspective. What once seemed essential may no longer hold the same importance. What once felt impossible to release may begin to feel like a necessary step. This shift is a sign that you are growing, that your trust is deepening, and that you are becoming more aligned with where God is leading you. It is not a loss, it is a transition. Trusting God's timing is a crucial part of this process. There may be moments when you feel like nothing is happening, when you have let go but have not yet received what is next. These waiting periods can be challenging because they test your patience and your faith. But just because you do not see immediate results does not mean God is not working. There is preparation happening behind the scenes, details being arranged, opportunities being formed, and circumstances being aligned in ways you cannot yet understand. In these moments, it is important to remain grounded in trust rather than drifting back into fear. The temptation will be to go back to what is familiar, to pick up what you have already released, simply because it feels easier than waiting. But growth requires perseverance. It requires the willingness to stay committed to the process, even when it is uncomfortable. Letting go also involves trusting that your identity is not tied to what you are leaving behind. You are not defined by a past role, a past situation, or a past version of yourself. Your identity is rooted in something deeper, something that remains constant even as circumstances change. When you understand this, it becomes easier to release what no longer fits, because you know that who you are is not dependent on it. As you continue to let go, step by step, you begin to experience a new level of freedom. The weight of holding on begins to lift. The pressure of trying to control everything begins to ease. And in that space, you start to see new possibilities, new directions, and new opportunities that were not visible before. This is where growth accelerates, where purpose becomes clearer, and where you begin to walk more confidently in the path God has set before you. When you step back and look at the journey as a whole, you begin to realize that every moment of fear, every season of uncertainty, and every act of letting go was never meant to harm you, it was meant to shape you. You were being guided, even when you felt lost. You were being strengthened, even when you felt weak. And you were being prepared for something greater than you could see at the time. What once felt like confusion was actually direction in disguise. And what once felt like delay was preparation working quietly beneath the surface. There is a powerful transformation that happens when you stop resisting the process and start trusting it. You no longer measure your progress by what you can see, but by the faith you are building within. You begin to understand that your life is not chance, not random, and not without purpose. Every step you have taken, even the uncertain ones, has been part of a greater plan that is unfolding with precision and care. And when you truly accept that, fear begins to lose its voice, doubt begins to fade, and confidence rooted in trust begins to rise. You are not where you used to be, even if you are not yet where you want to be. Growth has taken place. Strength has been built. And your ability to trust has deepened in ways you may not have noticed at first. This is what prepares you for what lies ahead. Because where God is taking you will require a heart that is no longer controlled by fear, a mind that is not overwhelmed by uncertainty, and a spirit that is willing to release anything that stands in the way of His purpose. There will still be moments when fear tries to return, when uncertainty tries to shake your confidence, and when the temptation to hold on to the familiar becomes strong again. But now you know the truth. You know that fear does not define your future, that uncertainty is not your enemy, and that letting go is not loss, it is alignment. You have learned that faith is not about having all the answers, but about trusting the one who does. And that truth will carry you forward, even in the moments that feel unclear. The journey ahead may not always be easy, but it will always be meaningful. And as you continue to walk forward with faith, you will begin to see how everything is coming together in ways you could never have planned on your own. Doors will open, paths will become clear, and opportunities will align with the purpose that has been placed within you. Not because you had everything figured out, but because you chose to trust when it mattered most. So keep moving forward even when you feel uncertain. Keep trusting even when you cannot see the outcome. Keep letting go even when it feels difficult. Because everything you are releasing is making room for something greater. And every step you take in faith is leading you exactly where you are meant to be. Trust where God is taking you, and don't let fear hold you back from the life you were created to live.